Hi YouTube viewers, this is Pete. I'm back again. We're still on lockdown. I think we're about 5 weeks into it now. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since I did my last video about the Apple II. And I did 3 so far, and this will be the 4th. And I think this will be my last one about the original equipment and software that I have. And then I may move on to some more recent technology and try to move this story forward from there. But there are a few more things I want to talk about before we left the original equipment. So previously I showed you the Apple II Plus, the Bell & Howell case. I'm pretty confident I bought this in 1982. I do have the serial number off of it, which says it was in probably the first 1/3 of those produced with the Bell & Howell case. Although what's curious is I looked at the motherboard, and the motherboard is actually dated 1985. Now that's a bit of a head scratcher for me because I owned it the entire time from 1982 forward. I do not actually remember having to get a new motherboard put into it, but it is possible. And certainly the date code on the motherboard would say that that must have happened. But anyways, and what I haven't shown before is the fact that I actually have an Apple IIe. Now this is kind of an interesting story. By the way, the Apple IIe was the follow-on to the Apple II Plus. And this one I actually dug out of somebody's trash. Maybe 30 some years ago, maybe not quite 30 years ago, somewhere in the 25 to 30 year range, I found this with the Duo disk drive, this monitor, and a system saver, a good old Kensington system saver, in somebody's trash can, ready for the trash man to pick it up. Now, I didn't know if it worked or not, but I could not help myself from pulling it out of the trash. And sure enough, it all works perfectly fine. And there were some good expansion boards in it, which, I still have those. Now, there was no software, diskettes that I remember pulling out of it, but this does work. It's pretty well fully configured. Came with a language card. It's got the 80 column capability, etc. It's a pretty nice computer, and it's fully functional. So I'm not going to bother showing it now, but just know it still works. I tried it just a couple weeks ago when I was doing everything else. So for whatever it's worth, I do have that. A couple other things worth mentioning is I kept most of my magazines related specifically to the Apple II. So I have several years worth of Soft Talk magazine as I remember it. This is the original magazine I used when once I found out they were available. Back in the day there was no internet, right? And this was about the most current and timely information we were going to get on any particular topic at the time. It was a magazine. So as you can imagine, these coming out just once a month, when you got one, you pretty much poured through it. So I was always very interested in the ads, any articles about programming. For me, these were huge, right? Because it was the only way to get information, really. I was not aware of any clubs or anything, to share information. There was no, communication between computers at the time. Honestly, it was the dark ages compared to today. So, the magazines were huge. And they still have a lot of really useful information, and I've kept all of them I had. I also very much like Nibble magazine. I do have several of they called Nibble Express. And these were basically accumulations of all the different software things that Nibble magazines through the previous year. So these were a real wonderful reference. So, and actually there's some diskettes that I have that, contain some of the software that was available too. So, if you didn't want to sit there typing all this stuff in yourself, you could get diskettes that had it already put together. So I have kept most of that information, just along with the computers. But quite frankly, the computers themselves, I've come to realize, are not what's that important to me. I've put these videos together because, if something happens to me and my family, children, want to understand what this stuff is and why I kept it, that's why I put the videos together, just to explain that. But honestly, what's more relevant to me about this stuff are the programs I wrote for them. So what I wanted to set about doing is actually trying to get the software that I had written archived off of diskettes and put in another form that maybe will have a better chance of surviving. Not that they're worth anything. It's just work I did, right? It was my ideas, my intellectual property. Not that it was worth anything, but those were my creations. The hardware was just what I used to do it. So, anyways, that's really all I've got. The next series we'll talk about, or next video we'll talk a bit about how to try to get this software off of these diskettes into another form that maybe I can tinker with it more in a little handier format. So, thanks a lot for following along.